I'm delighted to get to share with you, and I want to thank you for being here today. When my dad was a student at Moody Bible Institute in Chicago back in the 1930s, America was in a horrible depression, and crime in inner city Chicago was extremely high, violent crime. The gangsters were there. Al Capone, who everybody knows of, was in operation, and it was a tough place. My dad was working his way through Moody, training for ministry, and earning his keep by working at the Ford plant. And one night after working a double shift, Dad had gone to catch the streetcar to go back to where he lived. And he saw a very distinguished looking gentleman standing there in a nice overcoat and a newspaper folded into fourths that he was looking at, and a briefcase in the other hand. And Dad saw him and thought, I have not shared the gospel with anybody today. And Dad had made a commitment in one of the chapel services at Moody that he would try to share the gospel with at least one person every day. Well, Dad was by nature somewhat shy and introverted, but he was also a man who was always determined to keep his commitments. So Dad looked at that man and thought, this is probably my last chance. So he stepped a little bit toward him. Now, picture my dad, who had just worked a double shift at Ford, who was a young man who by 5 o'clock definitely had 5 o'clock shadow, and this was about 10 or 11 at night. So his face was stubbly, and his voice was much deeper than I could begin to imitate. He had his collar turned up against the cold, and he took another step toward the man, and the man, not looking directly at Dad, but just kind of stepped away a little bit. And Dad waited a moment and took another step toward the man, and the man took another step away from Dad. And then the streetcar began to come into view. And Dad thought, it's now or never. So he stepped right up in the man's face and said, "Mister, are you ready to meet God?" And the man broke into a run and jumped onto the streetcar while it was still moving. And my dad stood there and thought, what just happened? See, Dad knew why he was asking the question. But my hope is that when Dad got to heaven, he got to see that man again. And the man said, I couldn't get your question out of my mind. Every single one of us knows, unless we're insane, that we're going to have to die someday. But most people don't want to think about it. So I want to talk with you briefly about 3 questions. The first is, are you ready to die? Are you ready to die? In Luke chapter 12, Jesus is speaking to a crowd. Beginning in verse 4, he says, I tell you, my friends, do not be afraid of those who kill the body, and after that can do no more. But I will show you whom you should fear. Fear him whom after killing the body has power to throw you into hell. Yes, I tell you, fear him. Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 pennies? Yet not one of them is forgotten by God. Indeed, the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Do not be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. Jesus says, do not be afraid of dying. Don't be afraid of it. If you're trusting in God, you don't have to fear death, but you do need to be prepared for it. And so my first question is very simple and very blunt. Are you ready to die? I believe that is one of the most important questions that anyone can ever face. And God has given us in Christ Jesus the answer that takes away our fear. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son so that Whoever trusts in him will not be destroyed, will not perish, but will have everlasting life. Because God didn't send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but so that through him the world might be saved. So we can face the future, and we can face the prospect and the certainty of death without fear. As a pastor, I've gotten a lot of calls from people who've just gotten a bad diagnosis. And if I know the person well, I often say to them, you may not live long enough to die of this illness, which is not what they expected to hear. I also tell them, however, you may outlive your doctor, because I've known people who were given a very short span of time and ended up living for years. And I've known other people who got a very good bill of health and died. We don't know when we'll be called home, but we all know that we will be. We're all going to have to face God. So, question one, are you ready to die? Until you're ready to die, I would submit to you, you're not really ready to live. You're not going to live the way that you should unless you've already dealt with the question of death and what happens when you die. Once you have peace with God, you can live with freedom and without fear in this world. There are a lot. I grew up around old people. My grandmother lived until 1 week before her 101st birthday. My dad died at 87 and a half. I was born late in my parents' life. Dad was about to turn 48 3 weeks after I was born. Mom was 43 when I was born. She died at age 99. It is likely that despite my declining health, I will probably continue to creak on for decades. I'm going to be 72, God willing, in July, but there's a very good chance that I could last another 25, 30 years. It won't be fun, I know. And it won't be fun for the people who have to take care of me. But I am absolutely at peace about the fact that God says in his word, he has numbered our days. It's all written. God knows the end from the beginning. He's not waiting with bated breath to see what's going to happen. And God is working it all for good. But sometimes people don't live well because they've already kind of given up. Isaac spent at least 40 years waiting to die. You remember the story of how he lost his eyesight, which is one of the things that's happening to me these days. As he lost his eyesight, he decided, well, I guess this is it. I'll be dead soon. And so he told his son Esau, go and hunt some game for me and cook it the way I like and bring it to me, and then I'll give you my blessing. He was in bed without good eyesight, waiting to die. And his eyesight really was gone. He couldn't tell Jacob from Esau except by touch and by scent, and that's how he got fooled. But he wasn't ready to live. And I've known many, many people who, as they got older, just quit because they weren't willing or ready to live day by day, taking the day as a gift from God. There's a purpose in it. There's a reason I'm still here. I'm very grateful that I can come and speak. I'm losing my vision. I'm losing my voice. I'm losing my energy. But I'm still able to be here. And I just got a request to preach in India in 2027. I brought it to my wife and I said, we'll have to pray about this. And she looked at the thing and she said, ask them if you can do it by Zoom. But the fact is, God has a purpose. If you're here, it's for a reason. Are you ready to live? Some people are worried that financially their family's going to be fine if they die, but things could get dicey if they live. Why would a person be concerned about finances? Well, I'm just going to, in case you don't already have anxiety, going to try and feed the potential for anxiety by offering you an example of what can happen if the government is irresponsible with things like the national debt. I have in my hand a bill. This is authentic. This is not counterfeit. This is the real deal. And it says $100 trillion. It's real. $100 trillion. It's from the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe. Okay? That's what happens with hyperinflation. If a government doesn't understand the need to keep their currency valuable, it's just fiat currency and they can just print as much as they want and continue to run up debts. I mean, thank God we don't live in a country that would do that. Pardon me. But the fact is, you and I don't control that. So what happens if all the stuff that I've saved becomes worthless? Well, God is still on the throne. And I've had to hold on to the fact I've been blessed by the Lord to be able to take care of my family. But what if I'm not here and things spiral out of control? Then my family would have to just depend on God, the same God who provided for me, the same God who's provided for them. Our oldest son was born with severe birth defects, and we were told not to expect him to live past age 13. God willing, he'll be 48 in September. Now, does he have serious health issues? Yes, he does. But the fact that he's alive is a miracle every day. And the doctors who know his case say it's amazing, absolutely amazing. God is the one who has preserved him. God is the one who's preserved each of us. That's why we're here today, is because of God's faithful provision. So, are you ready to live? Are you ready to die? Are you ready to live? One more question. Are you ready to give? Jesus, in this same passage, goes on to tell them this is from Luke 12, in verses 13 through 21, he tells them a story about a man who was extremely successful financially and thought it was all for him. And he just kept building bigger barns. And he is known as the rich fool. It's the parable of the rich fool. We're all familiar with it. But here's what Jesus says. This is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself, but is not rich toward God. It's okay to store up some things, but it's not okay not to be rich toward God. How do we behave in a manner that's rich toward God? Well, again, the question, are you ready to give? Jesus goes on in this same chapter, and he says, from everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded. And from the one who is entrusted with much, much more will be asked. God gives to us so that we can bless others. It's not all for us. You're here today because you care about stewardship. You're here today because you know that what we are entrusted with is not our own. All of us are going to give an account to God. And all of us, therefore, need to regard what's entrusted to us as His and say, what would you have me do? Andy graciously shared with me some advice that I had given to him years ago, and that is you can never do better than to trust God. Is that the gist of what I said? You can't. God is faithful. Everything else can fail, but God will not fail. All kinds of corporations and so forth and organizations can fail to keep their promises. God always keeps his. And so if we do what we believe God is telling us to do, we're doing the good thing. I encourage you. Jesus said, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. Be ready, be prepared, but don't be afraid. You can live without fear if you're trusting in God and doing what he says. Thank you for letting me share.